The legend is perfectly constructed. It has every element of a great financial story: a single dramatic event, a secret known only by one player, a trade executed in the confusion of incomplete information, and an outcome so financially spectacular that it seems to confirm everything the story needs to confirm about the relationship between information and wealth. June 1815. The Battle of Waterloo. The Duke of Wellington's allied forces against Napoleon's army on the fields of Belgium. The outcome of this battle would determine the political and economic order of Europe for a generation. British government bonds, consols, were trading at prices that reflected the market's uncertainty about the outcome. A British victory would make them surge. A French victory would make them collapse. Nathan Rothschild, the London branch of the Rothschild banking family, had a private courier network that he had spent years and considerable resources building across the Channel. His agents were at the battlefield. His couriers were riding while governments were still receiving their first reports. And the legend says that Nathan arrived at the London Stock Exchange with the news of Wellington's victory hours before any official report reached London. And here is where the story takes the turn that has made it one of the most retold episodes in financial history. Instead of buying consols, the trade that a straightforward application of his information advantage would have dictated, Rothschild began selling. He stood at his usual pillar in the exchange and began unloading British government bonds, with a composure that suggested he knew something very bad about the battle's outcome. The other traders read his behavior as a signal. They sold. The market dropped. And then, quietly, through agents positioned across the exchange floor, Rothschild instructed them to buy everything, at the bottom. When the official news of Wellington's victory arrived hours later and the market recovered, Rothschild had bought at the trough of a panic he had engineered with his own behavior. This story is probably mostly fiction. The historical evidence for the specific Waterloo trade as described, the deliberate sell and buy maneuver, the enormous profits extracted in a single day, is thin and inconsistent. The Rothschild family has never corroborated it. The best financial historians who have examined the primary sources have concluded that the trade, to whatever extent it occurred, was likely much more modest and much less dramatically staged than the legend requires. But dismissing the Waterloo legend as false misses something important. Because the deeper truth that the legend is pointing toward, the genuine strategic advantage that actually made the Rothschild dynasty the dominant financial force in Europe for most of the 19th century, is not only real, it is more interesting and more instructive than the single trade story. The Rothschild family's genuine competitive advantage was not a single moment of information asymmetry. It was the systematic, decades-long construction and maintenance of the most sophisticated private intelligence and communication network in Europe, an institutional capability that produced information advantages consistently across every major political and financial event of the era, at a scale no individual trade could have achieved. To understand how this was built, you need to understand the context. Mayer Amschel Rothschild, the patriarch of the dynasty, who built the family's initial financial base from the Frankfurt Jewish ghetto, where Jews were legally confined, and whose movement and commercial activity were severely restricted by German law, understood something fundamental about information flow in the world he operated in. In the early 19th century, the movement of commercial and political information across national borders was slow, unreliable, and controlled by institutional players, governments, military organizations, the postal services they controlled, who had their own reasons to delay, filter, or distort the information they transmitted. A letter from Vienna to London might take 2 weeks to arrive by ordinary post. A diplomatic dispatch moved somewhat faster, but was subject to interception, translation, and the political considerations of the foreign offices through which it passed. In this environment, the entity with faster and more reliable access to accurate information about political developments, who was winning which war, which government was about to default on which debt, which treaty was being negotiated in which capital, had an advantage in financial markets that was not merely substantial, but potentially overwhelming. Financial markets in the early 19th century were dominated by sovereign debt, government bonds that rose and fell with the political and military fortunes of the states that issued them. The entity that knew the relevant political and military information before the market was the entity that could trade correctly before the market corrected its prices. Mayor Amschel understood this and built his strategy around it. His decision to send his 5 sons to the 5 major financial centers of Europe, Frankfurt, London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples, was not merely a geographic diversification of the family business. It was the deliberate construction of a human intelligence network with family members, whose loyalty and discretion could be guaranteed by bonds of blood and shared interest, positioned at the nodes of the most important information flows in European finance and politics. Each Rothschild brother was not simply a banking agent managing a branch office. He was an intelligence node, embedded in the social, political, and financial networks of his city, cultivating relationships with government officials, diplomats, military figures, merchants, and other bankers, and feeding the resulting information back to the network through the family's private courier system. The private courier system was the physical infrastructure of the intelligence network. The Rothschilds employed their own riders and had their own ships, a shipping capability that allowed them to cross the channel faster and more reliably than the government post. Their couriers were paid well, operated on established routes, and were incentivized to prioritize speed and reliability. The system was not cheap to maintain, but its cost was trivial relative to the financial advantages it produced. The cipher codes the family used for sensitive communications, documented in correspondence that has been partially preserved and studied by historians, allowed them to transmit commercially sensitive information across open postal routes without the content being accessible to interception. In an era before telecommunications, this was a genuinely sophisticated information security capability. The result was an information asymmetry that operated not on a single day, but continuously, across years and decades, through every major political and financial event of the post-Napoleonic era. When the outcome of the Congress of Vienna was being determined, the Rothschilds had family members in the rooms adjacent to the negotiations, reporting back in real time. When a South American republic was considering a sovereign bond issue, the Rothschilds had agents in the relevant capitals assessing the creditworthiness of the government and the political stability of the region before any public market information was available. The sovereign debt financing operations that made the Rothschilds the most powerful financial actors in Europe were the direct result of this information infrastructure. Governments came to the Rothschilds not simply because the family had capital, there was capital elsewhere, but because the Rothschilds had the intelligence capability to assess political and financial risk with a precision that no other actor could match. They knew which governments were creditworthy and which were not. They knew which wars were likely to end in which outcomes, and therefore which bonds represented genuine risk, and which were mispriced by a market operating with inferior information. The sovereign debt business was also where the Rothschilds created their most important strategic moat. By becoming the primary underwriter of European sovereign debt, managing bond issuances for the British, Austrian, Prussian, and French governments, among others, they positioned themselves at the infrastructure layer of European government finance in exactly the way that the Medici had positioned themselves at the infrastructure layer of papal finance 4 centuries earlier. The government that needed to borrow could not easily go around the Rothschilds. The information, the relationships, the placement network, and the track record of successful issuances were all concentrated in the family. Competitors could attempt to replicate the model, and some did, but the decades of relationship building, the depth of the intelligence network, and the family cohesion that allowed the 5 brothers to coordinate across national borders gave the Rothschilds advantages that could not be quickly replicated. The myth-busting aspect of the Rothschild story, the aspect that the legend about the Waterloo trade obscures rather than reveals, is that the genuine source of their advantage was not genius or luck, or a single spectacular trade. It was institutional infrastructure, built over decades, at considerable cost, through deliberate and consistent investment in the capability that the financial markets of their era rewarded most highly. Information asymmetry was the foundational advantage. But information asymmetry at scale requires information infrastructure. The Rothschilds built the infrastructure before they needed it, invested in it continuously, and protected it fiercely. The advantage it produced was not the result of genius applied to a single moment. It was the compound return on a decades-long institutional investment. The modern translation of this principle is not about carrier pigeons or family dynasties. It is about the fundamental relationship between deep, genuine expertise and financial advantage. In 2026, the information flows that determine asset prices are vastly more efficient than they were in 1815. The kind of crude information advantage the Rothschilds enjoyed, knowing a battle's outcome before the market does, is essentially unavailable in modern liquid markets. But the deeper form of information advantage, the kind that comes from genuine specialized expertise that allows an investor or operator to understand the second and third order implications of publicly available information before the market processes them, is not only available, but represents one of the few durable sources of edge in modern competitive markets. The specialist who understands a specific technology, regulatory environment, competitive landscape, or customer behavior so deeply that they can see where a market is going before the consensus arrives, there is doing the same thing the Rothschilds did. Not with carrier pigeons and cipher codes. With years of study, hundreds of conversations, primary research, and the intellectual discipline to follow the implications of what they understand to their logical conclusions before the market does. Build the information infrastructure, not the legend. The legend is a story. The infrastructure is the real advantage.